All right. So now we're gonna meet our next speaker, Daria Maslovskaya. And Daria, please, now you can switch on your camera and microphone. Daria, hello, Daria. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good.
How's everybody doing?
I guess great because, well, they had some time to grab some food.
Okay.
All
That
right,
always helps.
everybody. So, Daria is going to talk about teaching online methods and techniques. And frankly speaking, there have been a lot of questions about it because people are really interested. So, enjoy everybody Daria's presentation. So, Daria, floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Um, just a second. How do I share sound here? For some
Sound.
reason, I just don't see this box that I'm supposed to tick to share sound.
So, when you actually push that button, share,
Yeah.
on the panel, there are like, as far as I remember, there are two boxes, and you have to tick one. Share a sound.
I don't have this box.
You don't have it.
It says this setting is unavailable when several participants are using the shared content or something.
Hmm. Nobody else, I guess, is using sharing screen. You don't really have it.
Okay, let's just start and see how it goes.
Okay, try. You might try to close that sharing and then reopen it one more time. Maybe it will appear.
Nope.
Nope.
Still not there.
Oh my gosh. That's okay. Let me investigate meanwhile. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Maybe we could try to improvise, Daria, something.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see how
Yeah.
it goes.
All right.
All right. Again, hello everybody. My name's Daria Maslovskaya. I'm a freelance teacher and blogger. I've been teaching for about 15 years and blogging at anglophile.ru for 9 years. Recently, I've been leaning towards online teaching more and more. I have 3 online groups. I teach teachers and regular innocent people. And I also have some individual students. And I'm actually beginning to think that I like online teaching as much as I like offline teaching. But that hasn't always been the case. When I only started venturing online, I absolutely hated it. I remember talking to a prospective student who was after Skype lessons and coming up with excuses why I couldn't do Skype. I lacked human contact. I lacked the shared space of the classroom. The technologies were pretty basic back then, and they failed to live up to my expectations. Also, I hadn't figured out what worked and what didn't. And if something ever went off course, I felt helpless when I couldn't pull out an activity or a set of cards out of my box and just do it because all those activities were on paper. Now, fast forward to 7 years later, now I'm a big fan of online teaching. So, what changed? Well, for starters, I got used to it, and that's a huge part of it. Also, technologies have improved dramatically. Believe it or not, but back then, when you wanted to do listening, you couldn't share sound, as simple as that. So, listening was a nightmare. These days, you can do whatever you like and then some. Finally, over time, I adapted materials and figured out what approaches and techniques worked and what didn't, and what had to be changed. Now let's get down to some serious business. In this session, I'd like to talk to you about platforms and technologies such as Skype, Zoom, and Miro Virtual Board. I'm going to show how to use the board when teaching reading and speaking. And finally, I'll talk about some technical issues associated with these technologies and show how they affect pronunciation work and providing feedback. When teaching online, it all comes down to technologies and platforms. Personally, I've tried Skype and Zoom, and these days I use Zoom almost exclusively. One huge advantage here is that you can create breakout rooms and have students work in pairs or small groups, which of course maximizes their speaking time. And here's a short video showing how to create breakout rooms. 3 this time.
So the true sign of a civilized country is the way it treats its animals. Wow. What do you think?
Wow. Well, I totally agree with this quote because I think.
And that's how it goes. That's how it works. Another reason why Zoom rules is that it has a built-in board where we can all collaborate. There are two options here. You can use a simple whiteboard, or you can share the screen and write and draw over it. That's what the whiteboard looks like. Unfortunately, the board has its limitations. For example, you only get one screen to work with. And here's a short demonstration. So here I'm sharing my screen, the book we're using, and you can write the answers. You can do whatever you like, basically. But see what happens when you scroll down. All your notes and drawings stay where you put them, which is not very convenient. So one basic limitation here is that you only get to use one screen. And however, even with its limitations, Zoom board still offers so much more than Skype. When the built-in board is not enough, I use real-time board, which has recently been renamed and is now called Miro. These guys offer different plans at different prices with different limitations. With a free plan, the number of boards you can create and the number of collaborators, people who can write or make any changes to the board, is limited to 3. So what if you have more than 3 groups, more than 3 students? Does this mean you also need more boards? Well, not necessarily. Just because you only have 3 boards at your disposal doesn't mean you can use them with 3 groups only. Here's a life hack. Because boards are endless, you can go as far down or left or right as you want. You can use one board with 2 or 3 or more groups. So for example, here's a board I'm using with 2 groups. The left column is for group 1, the right column is for group 2. And that's what it looks like. And that's good news. That's a life hack. One board can be used for 2 or 3 or 4 or more groups or students. Now, what if the free version only allows 3 participants or 3 collaborators, people who can write on the board or make changes to the board? What if you teach large groups? Well, normally it's not a problem because, like in a real classroom, you might want to do most of the writing yourself. But if you want students to participate too, you can use the built-in Zoom board where the number of collaborators is not limited, or you might want to consider upgrading to a different plan on real-time board on Miro. Now, the reason I'd like to pay particular attention to the board is that when we teach offline, we have so much. We have each other, the teacher and the students. We have our entire classrooms. We have the shared physical space. We have objects and books and pencils and highlighters and realia and the board, of course. But online, we only have each other as seen on the computer screen and the virtual board. So a lot of teaching and learning happens on and around the board. So I'd like to show you how to use how the virtual board can be your best friend, if you will. For example, when teaching reading and speaking. For the most part, teaching reading online isn't that different from teaching reading offline. You'll probably go through the same stages: pre-reading, while reading, after reading. You might want to use texts for the same purposes and focus on developing reading skills and strategies, or you might want to look at vocabulary and grammar, or you might want to do genre analysis, or simply use texts as material for further discussion. In terms of presenting texts, there are two options. Option one, every man for himself. Here, students look at texts on their screens, or in their course books, or on paper. They follow the teacher's instructions, do what needs to be done, write their answers in their books. Alternatively, you could put the text on the virtual board so everyone can see it, and this is where it gets interesting. The internet, and more specifically virtual boards, offer one major improvement. When you put the text on the board, you get to draw and highlight and underline stuff together with your students. Things you could do include highlighting or underlining phrases and sentences that help to answer comprehension questions, for example. You might want to draw arrows to show connections, or you might want to draw arrows to show referencing, or find and underline the main ideas and whatnot. And the thing is, with groups in a traditional classroom setting, you can never be sure your students are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Are they really underlining things, or are they just doodling in their books? Are they underlining the right thing? Are they following, or are they lost? You can never be sure of those things unless you turn into a control freak and check what each student is writing in their books. And when you do all this highlighting and underlining and drawing on the board, you help students follow what's going on. You help them to be on the same page with the rest of the group, and you help them not to get lost. So this is how virtual boards offer this great improvement to traditional classroom practices. And even if students still don't bother to highlight and draw things in their own course books, they will still have screenshots of those boards for future reference. And your conscience will be clear. You did the best you could, win-win. Now, one of the byproducts here is that you help students develop a number of useful study habits and strategies. They watch you do all this highlighting and underlining over and over again, and they eventually realize just how helpful this can be. Those habits and strategies will come in handy later when students are on their own in the big wide world, or when they decide to take an international exam. Another reason to display texts on the virtual board is to limit what students can see. Here, for example, I removed all the paragraphs in the middle and asked the students to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph and work out what the text is going to be about. And then I showed them a little more and asked them to read the first and the last line line or two of every paragraph in the middle and work out what the paragraph is going to be about. And of course, I could have asked the students to read those paragraphs and those lines in the course books. But imagine the temptation to read just a bit more than you're supposed to. That would have ruined the entire purpose of that task. So that's another reason to display texts on the virtual board so everyone can see it. This way you can limit what students can see and work on developing reading skills. If you're worried your students will only watch you work, and they're just going to sit back, enjoy life, sip pina colada and watch you work, here are three solutions. You could have students help you with all the writing and drawing and highlighting or moving elements, or you can have them work together as a group, so you can sit back and watch them work. Or you could also design homework so that they have to look at the board again. Now moving on to teaching speaking online. And here I'd like to cover two aspects: using the board as scaffolding and adapting speaking activities. Sometimes we use screenshots of the board as scaffolding for speaking tasks. Here's an example. We were doing a vocabulary exercise in the course book, discussing different weather conditions, rain, fog, and others. We were also adding related vocabulary, words and collocations connected to those concepts. Like, for example, when talking about fog, you might want to mention things like thick fog, or fog came down, or we hit fog, we could hardly see the road, we pulled over, we came off the motorway, and the fog lifted. And all this related vocabulary is going to come in handy at the following stage, where students do exercise 4 and discuss their own experience. So what I do is I take a screenshot of this board, save it, and send it to the students, and then they use those notes as scaffolding during their discussions in breakout rooms. So that's one way to use the board when teaching speaking. Now let's talk about activities. I'm pretty sure many of you use them to practice grammar, vocabulary, communicative functions, and other things. There are different types. There are board games, card games, activities with role cards, matching games, and so on. You probably have those activities on paper, stuffed in a file or a box. And here's what my collection looks like. And those are great offline. But what do you do? How do you play them online? Well, it's doable. Let me show you how. For example, an activity where students have to match parts of sentences. Offline, students simply move those cards around the table. Here's how we played this game online. I put the cards on the virtual board and I took a screenshot. I then sent it to the students so they could discuss the task in pairs in breakout rooms. Then we worked as a group where the students were telling me what to do, and I was moving the cards around. Simply because this was a large group, 8 people, and as you remember, the number of collaborators is limited to 3. So I couldn't have students do this moving around, I had to do this. But students were also actively involved at the previous stage where they were discussing those cards in groups, and then when telling me what to do. Here's a short video. And as it turned out, you may not hear the audio, but well, the picture should be enough. So take a look.
And let's check.
We can hear
I'm
Daria.
hungry.
There is sound.
Why? How come?
Because I hadn't had lunch.
Because I hadn't had lunch.
Yes.
So,
I went to McDonald's.
and got a food poisoning. Okay, I was very tired. How come?
I hadn't slept all night.
So,
I fell asleep in the middle of the concert.
oh, I fell asleep. Oh, where is it?
Go down.
So if you work with individual students or teach small groups of 2, and you use the free subscription plan, which allows up to 3 collaborators, students can move those objects around the board themselves. If you use the free plan and you teach large groups, then you'll probably have to do what I did in the video. Or alternatively, you might want to consider upgrading to a better plan. Another example, a board game. The activity is designed to practice the second conditional. Offline, students throw the dice, move their counters around the board, and have conversations like this. Under what circumstances would you paint yourself blue? I'd do that if I was starring in Avatar. Under what circumstances would you steal a penguin from the zoo? I'd do that if the penguin lived in terrible conditions and I wanted to save it. Well, the same kind of thing can be done online. You don't have to depend on dice or counters. Here's what I did. I put this activity board on the virtual board and shared my screen with everybody. We used a random number generator instead of a dice. There are tons of those on the internet. For counters, we used commenting tools available in Zoom. Students chose their shapes and colors, and the game began. Here's how it went down.
3.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. This one. Yeah.
Under what circumstances would you fail a test on purpose?
If I wanted to repeat the course.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, under what circumstances would you deliberately clear up money?
What does mean to rob?
Like,
Okay. But like a okay. Okay, I do that. If I understood that they are not, they were not legal, and
if it was fake money,
yes, that's right. If they were, if
it was.
fake money.
Okay.
All right, there are different ways to do this. Students can draw circles or other shapes where they land, and once they've moved, they draw a new circle and erase the old one. That's what you saw in the video. Or something that I discovered after we played this game, students can draw a circle once and then simply move it around the board. And here's what it looks like. So the point is, you can play all kinds of games, including board games, online. You'll just have to get a little more creative and find solutions and find tools that will help you do that. So here, for example, we used a random numbers generator and tools available here in Zoom. Now, let's look at roll cards. In this activity, when played offline, there is a pile of cards face down. Students pick up a card with some information and role-play dialogues using this information. Here, for example, we role-played this model dialogue. How was your weekend? Great. Oh yeah? What did you do? I had a party. Or I went clubbing. Or I stayed in bed. Here's what you can do online. Scenario 1, if you want to do this as a group activity, you can put the cards on the virtual board, number them, and cover with rectangles like this. And here's a short demonstration of how this works and what tools you might need to do that. Students then choose a number and you uncover that card so the students can role play the dialogue using this card. So let's say a student picked number 2, then you uncover this card and students role play this dialogue. How was your weekend? Great. What did you do? I watched a football match, or learned to salsa dance, or had a party. Scenario 2, when the activity is best done in pairs. Here's the model dialogue the students are going to practice. Hi, what's your name? My name's Jack. Nice to meet you, Jack. Where are you from? I'm from Britain. And here you can make separate files, PDF files, one for student A, one for student B, and assign the role cards as you see fit. During or before the class, you simply send file A to student A and file B to student B. And then in pairs, students look at their files, their roles, and role play the dialogues. So role cards can be done both as a group activity here, or students can role play those dialogues in pairs, but then you'll have to probably prepare files for them. Now, these were just 3 activities, 3 types, and there are tons more. And the bottom line is every traditional activity, okay, 99% of activities can be adapted and used online. You might have to play around a bit, looking for a way to do that, but it's absolutely doable. Now I'd like to talk about some technical issues associated with popular platforms and how they might affect some aspects of our work, such as providing feedback and pronunciation work. When you work with large groups, and by large I mean groups of 4 and over, where you have students work in pairs, providing feedback and correction can be a bit challenging. Offline, when students work in pairs or small groups, you, the teacher, circulates and monitors and helps students. And even when you're helping one pair, you can still hear what other pairs are saying. Online, you can create breakout rooms and have students work in pairs and in small groups, but you can only join one group at a time and only hear what they're talking about. And you have no idea what's happening in other groups until you join them. This means you don't know what they're struggling with, what requires further clarification or practice. You can't provide immediate feedback or correction. Well, there are several solutions. If you use Zoom, you can record breakout room sessions, watch them later, and provide delayed feedback or correction. Solution number 2, when students are done in their breakout rooms and you've brought everybody back to the main session, you can do some feedback and ask students to report on what went down during their discussions. You can design specific questions, like, for example, who has the largest family, if they were talking about families, or whose story had the most unexpected ending, if they were telling each other stories, or what did you guys agree on, if there was a discussion, or simply ask them to share any insights they had. And when students do that, when they share their insights or summarize their discussions, they are likely to use the same language they did during their discussions themselves. And this is where you step in and provide feedback and or correction. Solution number 3, if you're a fan of correction or you want to focus on accuracy, you might be better off providing models, for example, model dialogues for pair work, so the odds of making tons of mistakes while being unsupervised are lower. As for freer practice and discussions, they can be done as a group, so you can intervene when necessary. So to reduce the odds of making tons of mistakes, you can just give students model dialogues for pair work, so they don't make as many mistakes. That's more like prevention. Now, when it comes to pronunciation work, what might make it challenging is that when several people are saying something at the same time, some voices overpower others. When does that happen? Well, for example, this is often the case when we drill pronunciation and students repeat words and phrases in chorus. Obviously, this is only a problem during group classes. It's not a problem when teaching one-on-one. Another common scenario is when we practice shadowing, a popular technique used to improve pronunciation, where students listen to an audio and try to speak along, often with a transcript in front of them, pretty much like singing along with a song. So oftentimes what happens is you only hear some voices, some students, but not others. Or when practicing shadowing, you hear the audio, but not the student. Luckily, there are some ways around this. Rather than drill words and phrases in chorus, you can call students out individually. And then no other voices will overpower this student, this voice. Now, shadowing, let's take this text, for example. I'll play a tiny bit.
C. 30.
A few years ago, I read in a newspaper that the staff at a library in a small town in the west of England had noticed that the number of visitors to the library was going down and down, and the number of books they were borrowing was going down even faster.
That's enough. Now, shadowing is best done in stages where students first look at the script, listen to the audio, and mark different features of pronunciation. Then, at stage 2, you play the audio, pause it, and have students repeat these fragments after the audio. And in stage 3, students read along with the audio. So the solution here is to do the first 2 stages in class and leave the last one for homework. So during the class together, you do stage 1, you mark the pauses and phrase stress and other features of pronunciation, such as linking words and elision sounds that are omitted. And then you do stage 2 and repeat after the audio, phrase by phrase, like this. Let me just demonstrate.
C. 30.
A few years ago, I read in a newspaper that the staff at a library...
the audio went out of control.
C.
A few years ago...
A few years ago...
I read in a newspaper...
I read in a newspaper...
that the staff at a library...
that the staff at a library... and so on and so on. So this is stage 2, which can be done in class without too many problems. I'll explain later what I mean here. So stage 2 can be done in class. You play the audio, you pause it, and then students repeat phrase by phrase. And stage 3 can be set for homework. Students at home practice reading along and record themselves. That's important. So you can then listen to those recordings and see how well they did or if more work is needed. So yeah, here the solution is to do stages 1 and 2 in class and set stage 3 for homework. With one-on-one students, it's only stage 3 that might be challenging because the audio might overpower the student. Stage 2, listen, pause, repeat, shouldn't be a problem because you only have one student, one voice. With groups, however, stage 2 is also going to be challenging as well, because when you do listen, pause, repeat, several people will be speaking at the same time. The solution here is to call students out individually or have them practice in pairs in breakout rooms. You can then join those rooms, monitor and correct pronunciation if necessary. As for stage 3, again, this could be set for homework. Now, before I wrap things up, let me just recap what we've discussed. We looked at several platforms and technologies that can make online teaching easier. We then looked at different uses of the virtual board, and more specifically, how it can be used for teaching reading and speaking. Finally, we touched upon some technical issues associated with technologies and saw how they might affect feedback and pronunciation work, and found ways to overcome them. And if there is something I'd like you to take away from this session, it's this. Find tools, find technologies and platforms and apps that work for you. If you can't play audio so your students hear it, listening turns into a nightmare. If your internet connection is too slow, speaking feels like going through an ordeal. So no wonder a lot of teachers out there hate online teaching. So find tools that work for you. Test them, explore them, play around with them. these days it's so much easier, and they solve a whole bunch of problems. Number two, teaching online might take some getting used to. You might have to just power through the initial turbulence, but that's okay. You'll come out on the other side and you might even become a fan. And three, if you know how to teach, and you most certainly do, otherwise you wouldn't be here, you'll figure out how to teach online. It won't happen overnight, but bit by bit you'll adapt your materials and activities and figure out what teaching methods and approaches work and what don't. So basically, teaching online is totally figure outable, and that's the main message I wanted to get across. So if there are any questions and if we have time.
Daria, could you please also share with us your contact information?
Sure. Right now?
Definitely, because
okay.
maybe
I was gonna send this presentation to Marina anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, so maybe somebody would like already to. Yeah. Okay, that's been an amazing presentation indeed, Daria. You really addressed all that methodological issues, yeah, in that wonderful way. All right. Shall I help you with questions, Daria?
Yes, please.
All right. So there is a question from Uliana Zubova, who's our actual speaker. Yeah. How do you prepare these slides for them? Photoshop or other editors?
Photoshop is too fancy for me, so I just use the regular paint tool available on every Microsoft computer. I mean, yeah, any photo editing tool will do.
Mm-hmm. So not big issue.
No, well, not in my experience.
All right, great. All right, so there are a lot of comments how useful it's been, yes, and a lot of things. Maybe you can see it yourself also in chat. Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question, Daria. So how long did it take you to dominate all these tools?
Well, like I said, I started this whole adventure 7 years ago, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still learning, and I'm still changing my approaches. So I think it's a long journey. But I mean, I'm not saying this to discourage you guys. It's just meant to show that, you know, it's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take a while, and bit by bit you'll get there, and bit by bit you'll adapt your materials and teaching practices and activities. And even when you think you're done, you might still have to do some more adapting and some more changes. So yeah, it takes a while, but you know, it's okay. Everything in life takes a while, and nothing happens overnight. So.
Mm-hmm. Could you share a bit your experience, give a bit more details how you started to work with groups online, because it's quite an interesting topic. A lot of people are quite interested in that.
Well, I guess this happened when I couldn't satisfy the demand. You know, there is only one of me, and I had a waiting list of students I couldn't take. So that's when I came up with this idea. I mean, if I have so many people on the waiting list, why not join them together and teach them online?
Weren't you scared?
I was, sure, yeah.
And
for all those reasons that I mentioned, yeah. How does this work? Where do I go? What technology do I use? How do I make them work in pairs? How do I know they're really working, not just chatting? So,
and what was your first platform that you started to use with groups? Skype, Zoom?
Yeah, that's another reason, actually, yes. I never tried teaching groups on Skype, exactly because I just couldn't wrap my mind around this fact that, you know, you can't put students in groups. And everything is going to be done as group work, which is not as efficient, you know. Also, we're all used to pair work and role plays and, you know, students working in pairs. So Skype didn't have that. And when Zoom was released and they introduced this great feature where you can pair students up and create those breakout rooms, that's when I realized, well, now I can finally try it. Now I can do it.
Definitely. All right, and let's get one more question. So, and okay, question from Elena. Can we save all the lessons to prepare for our next groups, or all the preparations is for one meeting only?
Well, I have all those materials in my on my computer in different folders. So yeah, when I do the same lesson with a different group, I use the same PDFs, the same pictures, and put them. I just have to put them on a different board.
Mm-hmm. All right, there are several questions. Okay, so how long did it take for word of mouth to start working? From Valentina.
Word of mouth. Well, word of mouth mostly worked the first 2 or 3 years, and then the website became a bit more popular, so people started finding me online through my website.
Mm-hmm. All right, Daria. So thank you very much for your amazing presentation. I've got one more question. Would you be able to join me after my presentation for maybe like 10, 15 minutes? There are still some questions in chat. And because
you know what I can do? I think I can just copy all those questions and answer them and put them somewhere in a file, or maybe on my website or somewhere else for people to read.
All right. But anyways, so you're going to leave right now, right?
Well, not right now.
Not right now. Okay. If you feel like, so after my presentation, we've got that Q&A session, but we actually have agreed that we're going to improvise with open mic and group discussion. But maybe, so somebody still can get some questions. Yeah, and we could like take 10, 15 minutes from there.
I'll see what I can do.
All right, let's see. So what can we improve? Thank you very
much.
Having
me.
Yeah.